Hey there and welcome. I'm Colin Scotland, and today we're going to be talking about growing and scaling an online business. And I've got a really special guest with me now. I'm going to bring him onto the screen in a second. It's Brad Lazarus, and Brad is the founder of Goliath Sourcing Academy. This is a company that trains people online in the property world, and Brad will share a little bit more about that a bit better than I can shortly. He's a digital marketer and he's an all-round cool guy. So let's waste no more time and let's bring Brad onto the call. Hey Brad, how are you doing?
Hi. Good. How you doing?
Good. Great to see you, my friend.
Good.
Great to see you. So Brad, we're going to be talking about growing and scaling an online training business today. Now, before we dive into the content, I'm excited to do all of that. Do you want to just start by giving us a little bit of background on you, what led you to where you are today, and let everybody know?
Sure. Okay, I'll try, and it's quite a long story. Whenever I get asked that question, it's kind of like frightening how long the stories become, which kind of is an indication of my age.
You've got 60 minutes, so we're good.
Yeah. Okay. Damn, really? Just that short. So my background started in the music business, so I was like dead set on coming out of university and going into the music business. I essentially went into the post room at what was then A&M Records, and which was owned by Polygram at the time, which subsequently got gobbled up by Universal, and then everything kind of consolidated in that world. I went from there and I set up, essentially when I say I went into the music business, I was a promotions guy. I was what is known as a plugger. So what's
that? What's a plugger?
So a plugger is kind of like an industry term. It's like the broker between the artist, the talent, and then the media. So for example, if you hear on a radio station, you'll hear songs that are rotated. They're known as being on the A list, the B list, on the C list. Or if you go to like MTV or any one of the music channels, certain tunes are playing on rotation. So somebody like me, a plugger, would be the person that negotiates, that takes the record or the video and goes to that media, to the head of playlist or to the producers at that particular media, and they negotiate a playlist. They say, look, can you put this on the A list? And they go, why should we? And you say, because, and you do a sales job, because we've got this much media spend behind it. Bryan Adams has had 5 top 10 hits in the last 5 years, and it's a dead cert, etc. Radio 1 or Radio 2 are playlisting it, etc. So that's essentially what I would do. It's a very much a kind of a networky, get to know people and a sales kind of job, if you like. So, but it's a thankless task. It's a horrible task, if you ask me. It's one of those, if you do your job amazingly well, everybody expects that anyway. So they all, so it's one of those scenarios. Anyway, I moved on from that and I set up my own management company at that point, and I started to manage acts, and then I used to sign those acts to the major labels. So I would go to the label and I was essentially negotiate a contract and maybe an advance. We don't get many advances these days, but an advance which would pay the band, pay me some, pay for recording costs, etc. Anyway, roll on a few years from that point, and I didn't really have I signed acts, but I never actually got them away, as such is the terminology. Got them away meaning never had a massive amount of success with them in terms of making money from them, having top 10 hits or anything like that. But at the time I'd met a lot of musicians, and I shifted my focus into managing managing at that time professional cover bands. So these are musicians. So it turns out in the music business, the musicians don't really make a lot of money from their own music. What they do make money from, if they know what they're doing, is playing other people's songs to corporate and private event clients who've got some money to pay. So that's what I would do. So I spotted this opportunity where there was a lot of musicians out there just wanting to play, to earn a few pounds, a few dollars, in cover bands playing for corporate and private event clients, but they all thought that all they needed to do was charge £100 or £150 per man for the night. And I saw this and thought, well, this is crazy. They're offering so much more value than the value of £150 times 5 that were in the band. So because I'd built these relationships with these guys, I essentially went off and I the ones that I felt as though had their head screwed on, I went and spoke to them and I said, look, I'll manage you. I'll be your we'll build your brand, and then we'll go and see if we can get some gigs for you, get some bookings for you. So it was quite early on in that relationship with those bands that I recognized that they didn't need a manager, they needed a marketer. They needed a salesperson, they needed a marketer. So that's essentially what I then spent the next 10 years doing. I started to get my marketing chops and sales chops together. So I used to create, build their brand up. Then we used to build their websites out. And then at the time, and then I didn't know it at the time, we started to build funnels. So funnels weren't the thing that they necessarily are now. I'm kind of showing my age again, right? They weren't necessarily the thing that they are now. Back in those days, they were just marketing campaigns, right? But they were marketing campaigns where I was using Google Ads. So, well, AdWords. It's even changed its name. It's that long ago. Using AdWords, swing band for hire, soul funk band for hire, capturing all of that traffic relatively cheaply, sending them through to specific landing pages based on their specific locations or keywords. And then they would make inquiries. Then the quote would send through. We'd add them to mail that contact to MailChimp, and MailChimp would then follow up with an email sequence and sell the band, the testimonials, FAQs, all that kind of good stuff that you put on good email sequences. And lo and behold, people would call me and they'd go, oh yes, I'd like to book so-and-so band, please. How much is that? It's 2,000. Yeah, no problem. That's fine. We can book that for you. Nice. I couldn't believe it. And it was like, that was my first realization that this kind of marketing and email game, if you like, and traffic, that stuff that is digital marketing essentially, was here. It was, and it was working. So
wonderful. That was the golden age, wasn't it? The golden age of AdWords, Google AdWords, man.
Yeah, I mean, when I used to be green fields around here, it was all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it really was, Brad. I made my first £1 million by bidding like 5 pence a click for the word. We were selling outdoor products at the time. It was like tents, camping equipment, that kind of stuff. Literally broad term searches like that, and we turned over £1 million.
It's amazing. But you know what? Even up until I closed that business down, six months, a year ago, AdWords was still sending traffic, qualified traffic, to the websites, sending these, and it's amazing what it is. Back in those days, the clicks were 5p a click. I mean, it's hard to imagine that there'd be anything that would be 5p a click now, but they really were 5p a click. It was amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, to be able to kind of go into a market that you were in that outdoor and camping side of things, that's like a kid in a sweet shop when you've worked out what needs to happen and what you need to do. You just keep doing more and more and more of it. I love that whole kind of concept of the vending machine. You put your pound in or your dollar into your vending machine, and then you're going to get 3, 4, 5 back. Which is what can happen in campaigns like that. Which is so So that was that. So in all of this time, I was very interested in property. So property has always been a thing. So many of my friends were in property, and so I struggled to scale that business up. That was because the market was a niche within a niche. I was, very niche kind of keywords, if you like, niche genres just in the UK market. I was, location wise, we were bound to certain locations because of the travel element. And so I made a decision about 5 years ago that I was going to pivot and shift into property. And I recognized that I had skills as a marketer. Well, I recognized that anyone that has a deal, it's all about getting deals in property. You need to get a deal. You can't act on anything until you can't make money without a deal. You have to have a deal. And I knew that in order to get a deal, you had to generate leads. And I was really good at generating leads. And I thought, you know what, if I can pivot into this property industry and bring my digital marketing, my more innovative and kind of progressive techniques of lead generation, I should be able to partner with somebody and add a lot of value to a partnership. And that's kind of what happened. I went out and I went networking and I spoke to lots of people, and I came at it from I'm a digital marketer. I'm a marketer. You need deals. I can create leads in a more innovative and progressive kind of a way than you're probably currently doing at the moment, which is just speaking to agents or realtors or whatever. And that's how I met my business partner. He really kind of understood the value that I could bring to a partnership with him, who was an out and out property guy. So that's pretty much kind of where we ended up. We started to do a few deals together, and he was very keen on going into this online. Well, he wasn't online at that point. He was very keen to teach what he was doing. So I said, funnily enough, I know this information marketing game. I know this online digital business models on how to package intellectual property and put a value on it and sell it for, and make it profitable. And that's a better model, in my view, than piling loads of people into the basement room of a hotel for a weekend. And he went, oh, okay, tell me more. And that's essentially how Goliath Sourcing Academy, which is the business that we co-founded together, came about, and what exists today, really. So there you go. That was relatively succinct, 11 minutes 48.
And so tell us about Goliath Sourcing Academy in its current guise. What is it? What does it do?
So what we do is we teach people how to essentially find property deals, how to source property deals, either to keep, to grow their own portfolios, or to package those deals on and to sell on to other investors who will then pay them a fee for that deal. So we teach I like to kind of use the parallel of maybe sales and marketing training. So we teach the kind of everything almost before the sale, if that makes sense. So we teach the early part of the property investment journey. How do you generate leads? How do you find your marketplace, your audience? How do you generate leads? How do you then negotiate the deals so that they're secure? And then we stop, and then what they do with the deal is entirely up to them at that point. So we're entirely an online business. So we have we're a membership. So we charge people per month to access our training and a support element as well. So often in property, things don't go as the course says they were going to go. When you're looking for a deal and you're speaking to landlords and you're speaking to vendors and homeowners, there are so many different circumstances and permutations of how a deal could come about that you really do need some hand holding as a newbie in that field. So we provide, as part of our online model, yes, we provide you with the training, but also we provide you with the support that you need in order to kind of progress and actually see a deal through. So yeah, that's pretty much. So as part of that mix, we do all that kind of good front end content marketing stuff as well, which has been really really valuable for us, really, which nobody in our industry has really done up until we did it.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. And so when it comes to the title of the talk, right, the growing and scaling an online training business, what have you got? Some nuggets of advice, some words of wisdom from your years of learning and failing and experience and all of that?
Yeah, learn and fail.
Yeah,
a lot.
Learn and fail and learn
fail
again.
A lot. Yeah. I don't know. I guess. All right. So if I answered that kind of question in a way of, what do we do that maybe kind of works for us, so to speak. We've found podcasting to. So when we started, when we set the business up, my first thing that I wanted to do because I'd been devouring podcasts for years, and I knew the effect that it had on my perception of those businesses and the personality brands that were delivering the podcast. So that was the first thing that I did. I said, look, let's get a podcast out. So we put a podcast out. We put about 20 hours worth of podcast out in about 5 months. And that established the business. In its first 8 months, we did over 6 figures in the first 8 months.
Wow.
And that really was off the back of the podcast. It was I think we got the formula right. Everyone in our marketplace that were doing podcasts, and there weren't that many, but they were all doing interviews, that interview format, which is great. But I thought we need something different. We need something which isn't the interview, because we're just basically, we know what happens, particularly with a big internet marketing podcast. The same people kind of do the rounds, right? And you need something. You either need to be a very good interviewer and ask a lot of different questions and get under the skin, or some kind of USP needs to come out of the same interview, which is difficult to do. We weren't very experienced at that. But I felt as though we had a lot that I took. What we ended up with was a format where we didn't interview anyone. My business partner, Mark, would put together a 10-minute segment, which we called Sourcing with Mark, as in property sourcing with Mark. And he would pre-record that 10-minute segment, which is almost like it's like a little mini lesson in itself, like a little mini module where there would be a beginning and end, and somebody could really, if they implemented what he was teaching, they could take a step forward. And I did a similar thing with the digital marketing with a property bias, real estate bias to it. And each of those segments were pre-recorded, and we would come together and record the links, and then we would edit in those segments to create this one podcast. And each of those segments had like a downloadable resource, like a content upgrade with it. And that was just people absolutely loved that. It was good rapport as well. So it was kind of an entertaining listen as well. It wasn't too dry, even though there was some serious kind of learning to be done, if you like, within that podcast. It just flowed quite well, and we got a following, and people were learning, and they were being entertained, and it just really seemed to kind of work. It just kind of hit a chord with people, and it established our brand in the early days. So that, but it's difficult to when you're doing interviews. It's the job is to go and find the interviewees. When you're creating your own content for each podcast, it's quite a lot of work in preparing that. It's like writing a 2,500 word blog post for every podcast, essentially. And I'm quite slow at creating content, so that was it became a bit. Can be quite kind of hard work, but there's a huge amount of value in it, which just is leveraged. People are listening to podcasts of ours and commenting on podcasts of ours from 2016.
Wow.
2017. So the content for me was always meant to be evergreen. I wanted it evergreen so that it would last, like a course might last for 2 years, 3 years, principles rather than tactically type stuff. I know we're kind of big on principles, aren't we?
Yeah, and that's interesting that you because I teach a lot about leading with value and unbalancing the seesaw, where you overwhelm people with value up front. That's a great example of that, isn't it? Where you had your business partner teaching about the property side, and then you teaching about the marketing side, how to get leads and all of that cool stuff. You're just bombarding them with value all the time.
Absolutely, yeah. And that was. And I think as well that the USP of the podcast came from the format, but it also came from everybody that goes into property. They they don't realize the importance of what role marketing plays in property. As I mentioned before, you can't do a deal without generating a lead, and generating leads is marketing. It's whichever way you want to kind of describe it, it's that marketing function. So when I came in and started to talk about digital marketing, landing pages and funnels and all the kind of stuff that we know as marketers, they went, oh, this is interesting. I didn't know I needed to know all of this, and it's actually quite interesting. So it kind of added to the USP and the point of difference that we could offer on our podcast. So, and interestingly now, I run this report every month now where I call it the Lead Magnet Effectiveness Report. So I want to see, this came from, I'll give our friend Ken props for this, who me, Colin and Ken meet regularly. So I'll give Ken props for this, because what I wanted to do was know, what is the effectiveness of what we give away for free? So I ran a report based on, well, how many purchases have we had this month? And then out of each one of those individuals that purchase, what lead magnets or content upgrades or downloadable free resources did they consume? And what always comes out top is our content upgrades that come from the podcasts. That the most, probably over 40 to 50% of the new members that we bring in every single month have all downloaded a content upgrade from one of the podcasts, which to me says a lot. Yeah, it says a lot about, they can't get to that content upgrade generally unless they've listened to the podcast. And so the listening to the podcast bit really pushes through that know, like, and trust, and it accelerates the progress of that know, like, and trust. And then to get that downloadable resource and maybe to implement on it and to see a little bit of a win off the back of what they've implemented using that resource drives them closer to a sale than anything else we give away, I would have thought.
Yeah, and you just hit on something really vital there, I think, Brad, in that a lot of times people focus on pushing content out into the world, and yeah, they try and help with the content, yeah, they try and make it valuable, but they don't make the link between, I talk about creating content with intent. So the content's wonderful, but we want somebody to do something as a result of consuming the content. And this is where I think you mentioned the content upgrade as being a really powerful bridge, because it's that content upgrade is the thing that allows somebody to give you their email address so that you can then create that and nurture a relationship and take them further down the funnel, right, towards making a buying decision. And so it's interesting that you mentioned the podcast being like the main kind of avenue for those people coming into the funnel.
Absolutely. And I think there's always a pressure, isn't there, that you've got to keep the consistency and the quantity of content going out. And often that can kind of, it can cloud the strategic reason for the content being produced in the first place, right? Which is kind of where what you're, another way of saying maybe what you're trying to say. It's like, why are we producing this content? What is the purpose of it? It needs to lead somebody to bridge the gap from where they are now to where we want them to be next, which should be closer to a purchase, to a sale, to taking the next step, essentially. And I think that sums up my philosophy generally, if you like, of everything that I do marketing wise, is how can we get somebody to take, always thinking about getting somebody to take the next step. Because for me, the whole sales process should become an order taking scenario. So everything up until that point is effective marketing, moving people along that path towards where we don't need to sell to them anymore, because the marketing's done its job. The selling bit is just the order taking bit. It's just, I always think about this what can we do that enables somebody just to effortlessly fall into our arms? That's kind of how I trying to think about things.
Yeah,
what is that. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's that kind of, but fall backwards.
Yeah,
it's that.
I've got a vision of an old-fashioned, romantic film, right, where they're like,
yeah,
the
absolutely. Well, that's it, isn't it? It's like there's so much kind of trust there. You don't even need to look at me as you're falling into my arms. It's just so effortless,
Catch me, Brad, catch me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Only joking. Yeah. Yeah. And it's that whole kind of that, if you think about it in those, you're very much one for talking about, how you feel and, kind of touching on what I don't want to use the word kind of fluffy, but it's the more kind of emotional, because it's so it's so important, all of that stuff. It's how do people feel about, well, you always think about what do you need to make, what do people need to feel in order, what do they need to feel about you, what do they need to think about you in order that they'd be happy to make a purchase. And it's just having that kind of thought process and philosophy behind everything, which helps me make decisions about whether what I'm producing is right or not, or is it going to work. So it's like kind of, there's so many examples, but yeah, it's that having that kind of ground base of foundational thinking, I think, is so important.
Definitely. And so in terms of an online training business, right? What are the things that what have been your like key lessons in getting that set up from a kind of practical standpoint? Because I get that you start with, like, you've seen an idea or a niche, and you guys came together with unique and expert skills in different areas that allowed you to make this thing a reality. What about learnings and tips and advice for actually crafting and creating that training business piece?
Yeah, good question. I guess I think I'm first and foremost, I consider myself a digital marketer. I'm a marketer. But I've got an interest in a certain area, and why I think I'm able to work in this sector of property investor training, essentially, is because I've got a business partner that has that knowledge that can be that the audience wants. But what I know is how to package that IP, is intellectual property. I understand how to do that. I've been exposed to it from the receiving end of how I've learned. I love to consume other people's marketing messages, right? I love to be on the receiving end. I mean, one of the, I always laugh at this online mattress market that exists nowadays with Eve Sleep, and so we needed a mattress, and I was like, oh great, this is going to be good. I'm just going to expose myself to this barrage of mattress communications through all these companies, and that to me is like, but that forms kind of, you analyze all this stuff and it kind of forms part of your, how this game works, if you like. And if you're a marketer and you know how the game works, particularly when it comes to packaging information, and you find somebody like a partner that I found, you've got a great opportunity to kind of create an information business, a training business in the way that I have. And so yeah, I mean, if anybody's out there thinking about that to me is a great kind of formula. Now, it's not easy to find a partner, but go out and network and in the area that you feel as though might be an area that that you might want to kind of create a business in, if you like. What's interesting about property, particularly in the UK, is there's so many partnerships, there's so many joint ventures, and everybody's working collaboratively, which you tend not to see that so much in other industries. And I think that there was a real eye-opener for me that you know, there's so many opportunities to kind of work with other people, particularly in what is essentially it's hard work these days. You know, the marketplace is fragmented and diversified, and I think we kind of need to work more collaboratively generally. So I would say that was a big, you know, seeing how our partnership came together was a big thing for me, really. Did that answer your question? I don't know whether it did it? But
yeah, it kind of. I think you mentioned about, because obviously if you're starting out with an idea, then typically you may have, well, there'll be a scale, won't there? You may have zero experience in that particular area that you're thinking about having an idea in. With you had the marketing skills, and then you matched with your business partner who had the industry expertise, right? And that's like a match made in heaven, isn't it? I guess what you're saying is, if you have the industry expertise, then obviously you then need the marketing skills to be able to find and grow that training business. And similarly, if you've just got the idea but no expertise, then maybe looking at potentially partnering with somebody that has those expertise and can be the front of what you're doing.
Absolutely, yeah, and that really has been. I wouldn't have been able to do this with, and that's the thing as well with the kind of, you know, kind of pondering on kind of partnerships for a moment, is I've had business partners in the past, and if I look back, and they've never really worked out, and if I look back now, it's very clear to me why. I mean, firstly, I think people go into looking for a partner with the wrong reasons for looking, because they almost want somebody, you know, at worst to do the work that they don't want to necessarily do, or to give them all the answers, you know, shine this light on this pathway which is slightly murky at the moment. And what ends up happening is you find somebody, you almost attract somebody who's a little bit like yourself, and that's not what good partnerships are. Good partnerships are about very kind of complementary skill sets, and where you can come together, communicate, trust each other, which takes time and a relationship building, trust each other's judgment, and then that creates something exponentially bigger. And that's a real, it took me this is my 5th business partnership. Now, some people would say it's my fault. Well, it is my fault. I was looking for the wrong partner, right? You're always thinking you've got the right partner and you haven't. And that's also where I think if you go into an industry with a very, that isn't digital marketing, and you're a digital marketer, for example, you're more likely to find somebody with a complementary skill set, as opposed to if you're going out there and you're going to digital marketing or, you know, events, for example, and with a view to the chances are you're going to find another digital marketer, which is not really where you want to be, I think. So yeah, that whole kind of partnership thing is, you know, I think is kind of a key to, if you're going to work with somebody, it's a key to how you approach that is key, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And so in terms of building and growing and the pains of that, what were some of the important lessons that you?
So yeah, well, I think we're going through a scenario at the moment where, so we did the 6 figures. We broke the 6 figures in the first 8 months. Then we kind of plateaued out for the next 8 to 12 months, and then we doubled the business, right? Because I think we got a little bit kind of complacent after. It was like, oh, this is easy. We can, you know, and then you kind of plateau out after that 6-figure breaking, and then we doubled the business again because we kind of got our act together, and now we've kind of plateaued out again. And I think we've plateaued out now because we're kind of running out. Well, so many reasons, but it's team building. This is kind of where I'm going. Is how are you going to grow your business without you, essentially? How are you going to build this team around you? What does this team do? And you know, how are you going to organize them? So what we've done over the last year is we set up, we got much better at things that weren't marketing. So we recognized about 18 months ago. Well, I recognized that 18 months ago that because I'm a marketer, I try to solve every single problem in the business with a marketing stick. I'm like bashing this problem over the head with, no, we've got to do this, change this funnel, or we got to sell more of this, or, you know, we got to increase the conversion rate over here. And it's a bit, there was a bit of a realization, and I was getting a bit tired because I was hitting these problems with the marketing stick and they kind of weren't really being solved. Mm-hmm. So I looked at it and went, you know, maybe we need to solve these problems in another way. And the way that we did that was to become better business people, better entrepreneurs. So I think what happened with me is I came from this world of online digital marketing, where you create this business off the back of digital marketing, and everything is marketing. The products is product marketing, and it's funnels. It's everything is marketing based. And actually what we needed to do was go out and find help to become better business people. So what does that mean? That means understanding how to read financial statements more clearly. What is a profit? What is profit and loss for a start? How do I read this profit and loss statement or income statement if you're in the States? You know, the balance sheet. What is the balance sheet? What are the assets and liabilities, and how does that impact the business over the long term? You know, what is this cash flow statement? What is a cash flow statement for a start? How do you create a cash flow statement? How do I read a cash flow statement? How do I ensure that a cash flow statement is kept up to date? How do I use the cash flow statement to forecast over the next 3 to 6 months as well? So we got much better at doing that, and that allowed us so much control, if you like, over the business. We really kind of felt like we could, you know, sleep at night. I felt like we really kind of were tightly on the handlebars. The business might not have been growing, but we knew why we were flatlining. We knew that, oh, you know what, the results are out for October. This is what the profit and loss looks like. This is what the cash flow forecast look like. If we carry on like this over the next 3 to 6 months, we're going to be at this low point, right? We better do something about it. What are we going to do? So it allowed us to kind of do a lot more kind of planning and take more control. And that was kind of a big thing for us, because then we started to become, much more kind of entrepreneurial, if we like. We could look at other opportunities, and that allowed us to create this investment fund. So every month we were provisioning. We kind of learned the art and science, if you like, of provisioning. So provisioning is essentially putting, you know, you got your revenue coming in and you got some costs, etc., and then you're provisioning funds away into different accounts based on what your plans are. For us, we wanted to build up an investment provisioning fund. And that investment provisioning funds, we weren't 100% sure what it was that we wanted to actually invest in, but we knew we would want to grow the business at some point when we knew exactly what direction we wanted to take it in. And we knew that we wanted to fund our investment, not get outside investment. So we wanted to continue with that bootstrapped approach. And that has been, so having that pool of cash there as it grows, and it's amazing every month. If you just keep this systemized approach and you keep on top of your cash flow and you keep looking at your financial statements and the foundational statements in the business, all of a sudden it starts to grow every single month. And then you go, right, you know what, we've got an investment fund now, and we need to now decide on what our next step is and where we go from here. And that has been quite kind of liberating to the mind. You're not spending everything that's coming in, essentially. Really keeping an eye on those statements, of course, but actually also really focusing down on the key performance indicators and measuring every single month. What are our 3 monthly goals? What are the KPIs related to those? What are the metrics that we need to measure weekly and monthly that allow us to see what the steps are towards that end goal, those KPIs? And that's also been a big thing for us. So just getting better at doing all of that and being better business people, I think, has been a big lesson. And it's fascinating to kind of go into, it almost feels like I've kind of grown as a, I've grown up from just being the marketer, and I've grown into being a business person. And I think it can be very easy in this digital marketing game to kind of be sucked back into the tactical and just strategic marketing stuff. Really is the thing that's going to drive your business in it. And yes, it is, but you're going to drive it quicker if you understand all the other elements of running a business as well.
Yeah, and I guess they're all skills that we almost didn't sign up for, but they're essential in anybody can start anything, but to scale takes a particular set of skills. Like Liam Neeson says, I have a very particular set of skills and I will find you. You've seen the film Taken?
I haven't actually, no, but it sounds quite scary. Yeah.
If you've seen the film Taken, you will get the
right.
joke. But basically, you go into entrepreneurship with a vision, a dream, a thing that you want to do or achieve, whatever that is for you, and then all of a sudden, as this business grows and blossoms, you have to learn and develop and grow in ways that just knock you sideways because you didn't foresee this kind of stuff. Like you with the becoming a business person, the KPIs, the numbers and all of that. Yeah.
But I think that what the byproduct of that is becoming much more aware of what's happening at a 10,000 foot view. And then the clarity about how you're going to then grow your business by employing team, whether it be freelancers, virtual assistants, whatever you decide to do, becomes a lot clearer. So you start thinking like an entrepreneur shouldn't be in the weeds. We need to be up at the top. But for me, I've been in this, I've been in this tactical pit for a long time.
Yeah.
Just kind of looking through the weeds over here and all this kind of, and actually it's you got so much more clarity when you're looking down on the weeds, if that makes sense.
Gary Vee talks about being in the clouds and being in the dirt, doesn't he?
Right.
And it's so true when you are, especially solopreneurs and people just starting out and all of that. You're doing everything yourself, right? You're doing everything. You're visioning, and then you're getting down and dirty in the weeds of everything. And it's important to have that balance.
And I think there's also a thought process that if you're in this online game, there's a thought process that hiring a VA, a general VA, is yes, it's a good first step. But I think you can get caught out. I think a general VA frees up the time of the business owner to work on the higher income generating tasks in the business, right? Great. But then what happens is the VA is working full time, the business owner is now working on more higher income generating tasks, but their capacity is now reached, 6 months, 8 months, a year down the line, their capacity is now at its height. Where then, right now, what we need to do is you can't bring in another general VA to free up more of your time, because you're working as the business owner, you're working on the stuff that is skilled high income generating task activities. So what do you do then? Well, you need to now go beyond what we traditionally think as a general VA, and you need to hire somebody to replace some of your skills. So 50% of what you do in the day, you need to now hire if you want to take it to the next level. And I think that's the people get to that plateau because it's a big commitment to financially to hire somebody that's got 50% of what you do in them. It's a much higher value individual, and therefore it's going to cost you more, and therefore is more of a, have you got your business plan down? Where are you going with them? How are they going to, it's an investment in your business, essentially. How are you going to see a return on that investment? And that I always found as a bit of a stumbling block. We're kind of gone past that now, thankfully. And everything, it's almost like you jump the first fence, but then there's an even higher fence next. And once you jump that, the fence after that's a little bit lower, if that makes sense. It's a
It does.
terrible fence analogy, but yeah.
And I guess letting go as well at that stage, isn't it? Because you're getting this has become like your baby, like your child, hasn't it? This thing that
Yeah,
you're growing and developing and watching mature, right? So allowing people to come in and letting go of the reins to a degree so that you can do the more important stuff. It's things like this that you almost appear like ceilings, don't they? As your business is going through the different stages of growth, that you have to be able to let go of control in order to regain control of the direction, you know?
absolutely. I think a lot of people don't, because they don't get their mindset right. They're either not exposing, they don't want to for fear. It's a natural human reaction that the consequences of getting it wrong are so grave, I'll just back off. Or they don't expose themselves to enough repetition of the message. So I always think that, we consume a lot of, we read a lot of books, and a lot of the information is the same information a lot of the time. It's just packaged in different ways, but I don't see that there's anything wrong with that. It's how do you get this? How do you change your mindset from being in the weeds to being in the clouds? Well, you got to work on changing your mindset. The only way you'll work on changing your mindset is to consume information and talk to people that elevate you to the clouds, and that takes repetition and time and an openness, I think. And that can be really challenging. I found that challenging. I really have found that kind of challenging. What helped me actually to get into the clouds as such was I started to do a lot more kind of investing. And in investing in, I used to kind of ramped up my kind of property game, if you like, and seeing, you have to see things very strategically. You can't get into the weeds almost with a lot of the investing stuff. It is very much a strategic game over the long term, and that really kind of then started to kind of help me kind of rise above the weeds or the dirt, So that also helped as well. So yeah, it's good. It's a good. You mentioned before that it's you I think you said something along the lines of it. You didn't expect that to happen when you got into business, that you'd need this whole other set of skills. But once you've got your head around that, I feel almost very grateful that I've kind of hit those barriers, because I've developed all these other skills which I hadn't developed previously. So it's been a big shift for me.
Yeah, and I guess you have to be open, don't you, to that, to the change, to the learning, to the growth, to the sideways development that you never expected, and that's part and parcel of the journey, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's it's great as long as, and I think it's also you need to stay motivated. It can be quite, if you keep doing the same thing and it's not working, you have to do something, or it's not working, or at least you've plateaued and you can't work out why you're not taking things to the next level. It starts to grind at you. It starts to grind you down a little bit, and you need that inspiration of new learning and a new mindset shift, and that comes from books or mastermind groups or networking events, and go out and find them. Which is for me, it's been I love all that. That's I like you. I'd love to just be able to kind of create a career on conversation, but some of us have to do some work, Colin.
Oh.
No, I love that. I just think there's so much. Well, obviously in our mastermind groups, you kind of come with there's so much kind of wisdom and like small hinges which swing big doors, which is the best form, if you like, of wisdom. Just short, thought-provoking kind of comments that leave you going, oh yeah, I never thought of that. That's a good angle to come at things from. And then that's the big door that swings off the back of that. It's amazing ability to be able to have that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
That's all right.
Yeah, thanks for sharing with us today, Brad. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day.
Thank you.
To chat with me. I could talk to you all day. It's been the hours almost just vanished like that,
Yeah.
So it's been really good chatting to you.
Well, I hope everyone's found it helpful. Yeah, I've tried to kind of share openly. Yeah.
And you know, I appreciate your transparency and your openness about that journey on scaling more than anything, right? You know, that those headaches and those roadblocks that we hit, getting from one level to the next and to the next and to the next. And I think that it's great to know that you're not alone in all of this, and it's great to hear people's perspectives, because that, I think, really gives you perspective to be able to reflect and make those shifts that at the end of the day will allow your business to just get to that next level, wherever that is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I should mention, actually, before we kind of around that, you know, we're going through a bit of a kind of a phase at the moment, kind of evaluating where we are and where we want to take our business over the next 3 to 5 years or so. And this thing that constantly kind of playing on my mind is this idea that most entrepreneurs, if you like, do what they do in their business because they need to. It's something, I need to do this, I need to do that. But do you really want to do it? And that's the, you know, we kind of created this 3 and 5 year plan over the last 2 weeks. So I haven't mentioned this to you, Carl, the last 3 and 5 of the last week or 2 weeks or so. And we sat back and we went, do we really want this? Or do we just feel as though we need this plan? Do we really want what it's going to give us? Let's just stop and think about it, because you know, we don't want to get to 5 years and go, don't really want this. You know, it's actually what we needed, but I don't really want it. But you can have what you want. You don't have to take what you need. You can have what you want, and that's quite almost quite profound for me once you start pondering on that a little bit. So yeah, interesting. That thought I'd give you a little bit of an insight.
A powerful lesson in all of that, because that ties back in to a lot of the stuff we've been talking about around the vision for you, vision for your family, for your business, and it all has to be anchored in that for it to make sense. Otherwise, what's the point, right? What's the point? It has to be anchored solidly in that vision.
Absolutely. What's the purpose? And you talk about, you know, that kind of it coming from the inside out, whereas I think a lot of the time, which is the want bit in my eyes, but as opposed to what a lot of business owners or entrepreneurs do, which is, you know, what's external, what do I need, not what do I want. And I think you can have what you want, just maybe takes a little bit more kind of thought and planning. And but yeah, that's been quite an interesting couple of weeks for us, kind of discovering certain things about, I don't want that. Oh, do we need, that's what we need. I want that. And I want that. I want that. Well, we can have it. Let's go and find it, you know. So
love it. I love it. Yeah. You're playing it in the top of top of Maslow's triangle there.
Right.
That's the top of the pyramid. That's the actualization. That's where magic happens. That's where we change the world, Brad. I love it.
God, change the world. Blimey. No, just a nice house, a couple of cars and a few holidays. I'm all right. That's fine.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Brad, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. Thank you so much for your time. Just before we wrap up here today, could you let everybody know how they can find out a little bit more about you and what it is that you do? Where
so if you go to a couple of places, if you go to my personal URL, and it's just an about me type of page, is bradlazarus.co.uk. So that's bradlazarus.co.uk, and that's kind of just lists the things that I've, you know, got interests in. But my main day today and what we've been talking about is Goliath Sourcing Academy. So that's Goliath Sourcing, SOURCING Academy, GoliathSourcingAcademy.com. So yeah, and if anybody wants to email me and get in touch, you can just email brad@bradlazarus.co.uk.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Brad.
Thank you, Colin. Always a pleasure. Yeah.
My friend, I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. And guys, I hope you've enjoyed the session with Brad and I talking today about growing and scaling an online training business, especially the pains and the issues that we go through at that scaling piece, because getting ideas off the ground can be the easy bit. Running the business, getting the business to the next level and achieving those things that you want to achieve can be the thing that makes the business stand or fall. And it's been wonderful to hear your take on all of that today, Brad. Thank you so much. And Gail, I believe, will be on with the next segment very soon. And stay tuned. See you soon, guys. Thanks, Brad. Take care.